Now I will tell you that I saw something on the great Anthony Davis's show, 5 Minute News. He's a friend of the show, my favorite Britisher, as you're aware. Play a little bit, if you would, Albert, of what I saw on his show.
A particular candidate. They aim to divide us against each other, fostering an environment
the Russian
of chaos,
infiltration of social media. Is that what he's talking about? The Russian infiltration
and
of social
confusion,
media.
where you say, "Well, I don't know what to believe or who to believe."
Now,
if that's you, then
Trump. This is also about Trump disinformation as well. I'm so sorry. Okay, go ahead.
They have
Continue. I won't interrupt him again.
The US influencers Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson have addressed allegations that the US content creation company they were associated with has been provided with nearly $10 million from Russian state media employees to publish videos with messages in favor of the Kremlin's interests and agenda, including over the war in Ukraine. The conservative media company today, Blaze Media, said it had terminated its contract with the YouTuber Lauren Chen. Chen and her husband founded Tenet Media, which received as much as $10 million from intermediaries to the Russian government, and then paid out large sums of money to conservative figures to produce online videos meant to influence the 2024 election. Talking points, the types of things that you would hear from Donald Trump or on Fox, all stemming from the Kremlin.
People sowing discord. I mean, that's what the Democrats did for 4 years when we were at each other's throats about Russia and whether or not Donald Trump was a Russian plant or a Putin puppet. The Democrats are the ones who sowed the discord.
The American influencers and media personalities acted unwittingly, according to the indictment. And this is part of the problem, is that people don't know that they are being coerced and manipulated. And to receive a payment of $400,000 a month, one might want to ask questions. Who has that type of money to spend? The 2016 election showed us how damaging foreign interference can be, and we cannot afford to let it happen again. Since then, our intelligence agencies and law enforcement have been vigilant in their efforts to safeguard our electoral process. However, the tactics being employed this year are more advanced. Russia is leveraging technology, misinformation, and media influence at unprecedented levels.
They're cultivating the field. Russia now, they're setting up a reason to crack down on social media and free speech before the next election, publicly accusing Russia of a sustained campaign. And if there are bad stories about to break on Kamala, you can be sure they're going to tell you it's Russian disinformation.
Okay, thank you. I had to hear that, Jeanine Pirro again. I'm going to take points away from Jeanine Pirro for having to look down at her talking points so regularly during that little run and that little riff. But I liked what Anthony Davis said. If there was only some way to bring him on, my favorite Britisher, everyone on your feet for the man who created the 5 Minute News. He's on a streak. He's insanely popular now. So let's get him while we can. The great Anthony Davis, everyone. Yeah, you know it. Come on. I love that you've come here to our country with that smooth way of speaking. I could listen to you read the Cheesecake Factory restaurant menu.
Well, that's a long menu. That is quite the menu.
Exactly. That's why I chose it.
That would take a while. When I came to this country, I didn't have this accent, of course, because back in London, I used to talk like this, and that's what we were doing. Oh yeah, that's right. It was like that. And then when I came here, I decided to just step things up.
If that's really true, this is a great fact about you. Is that really true?
It's never been anything like this.
No, it's
It
not.
depends if I was on the air or not, but all of my family, they all kind of speak a bit like that because, they're all from the East End and that's their kind of attitude. But I had elocution lessons. So everybody thinks I went to university. Oh, you must have gone to Oxford or you must have gone to Cambridge. No, I just had elocution lessons.
It's marvelous. Well, whatever you've done, don't touch a thing now. It's perfect. Okay. So I like that little run that you did on what's happening with essentially the infiltration of Russian talking points and divisive talking points into our media, and that's why I like the fact that you propped up Jeanine Pirro a couple of times for us to see. And now with these accusations that they have gotten to influencers, as you said, I thought so well, you're paying an influencer $400,000. You'd think that receiver of $400,000 might ask where that money's coming from.
$400,000 a month.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
crazy.
a year you'd be like, well, that's a lot of money, but a month? Look, of course they knew where the money was coming from. These people, they were told that it was a private investor. That was something that I didn't put in the video, but they were told that the money was from a private investor. But you'd want to ask questions. I mean, you've got to be pretty naive to think that people have that kind of money to spread. And to me, that is a similar equation to Elon Musk finding $44 billion to buy Twitter. It's like, it's not worth that. Like, you don't have that kind of money. And he, as we know, he had to scrabble around to get that kind of money, including, being given some from foreign investors. So, that phrase, follow the money, it applies in every case, doesn't it?
Most certainly. And I know Dave Rubin, among others. I haven't talked to him in many years, but he came up through TYT, which is where I still do. In fact, I'm going to be on TYT today. I'm going to be on the power panel on TYT at 7 o'clock Eastern time. So anyway, point is, he's made his own pact with the devil or changed his act or is dancing to a different tune and has been doing that for a while. And it's been underwritten by various, it's suggested, right-wing concerns in this country, domestic right-wing concerns, Koch brother type money. But this adds a whole other layer. And as you say, it also adds a pretty insanely wealthy layer. Like, you can get rich in a hurry doing business with the Russians.
I don't know how much money people need, right? Like what are those influencers who are, one of them's a kid. I mean, how do you spend that kind of money? Because $400,000 a month, I mean, there's millions of dollars every year. I just don't see. I mean, I don't know. I'm just a socialist at heart. There comes a point with me where I'm like, how much do you actually need? Like, maybe
Sure,
you should give the rest away.
Well, billionaires have shown us that if you want the super yacht, you need a lot. No Contendo has a point. Jeanine Pirro's parents are Lebanese. I don't know if this is true. This is just a super chat, but I'm presuming it's true. No Contendo usually has pretty good information. Jeanine Pirro's parents are Lebanese. Trump should talk about her family's immigration process. Laura Loomer is Jewish, but 45 is pals with Nick Fuentes. It's true. I mean, I don't know if he's pals with Nick Fuentes, but he certainly doesn't disavow Nick Fuentes or his followers. I don't know about the rest of this. Look, if you really drill down on Trump, he's obviously everyone who will support him in any way. He views positively. I mean, in the moment, right? Nazis, theocrats, whatever it might be, despots. That's the magic of Trump. He's completely malleable.
But we are expecting his default to be normal and law-abiding. And that's where we've been going wrong, because he's never been normal and law-abiding. He's always been criminal, and he's always had deeply rooted mental health problems. He is not a well man. And so we've been judging him by the standards of ordinary and being like, oh, he's so unordinary or subhuman or whatever you want to call it. And it just doesn't work. You cannot put him into the category of a normal person. The reason that he gets on with these despots and these criminals is because he is one. And that's how his mind works. He is a mentally compromised person. And if you study history and you read about Hitler's mental health or Mussolini's mental health, they all suffer from the same malignant narcissism that Donald Trump does. There is a pattern. And, I've been spending a lot of time recently focusing on the mental health aspect of this. Nobody talks about it in the corporate or mainstream media because it's like an unknown quantity. It's a subject that it almost kind of gets him off the hook. It doesn't get him off the hook because, you can still be criminalized for being mentally ill, but he should be in a secure institution, and that is where. No, seriously, it's not even. I'm not even kidding.
I know you're not.
He is a screaming madman, and if you heard him making his speech in New York about the economy yesterday, especially that section on childcare, which I'm sure you're going to play in your show at some point, he makes no sense, and it is us projecting excuses to normalize him.
All right,
when
so
he's
I know
anything
you've
but.
spent a lot of time with Bandy Lee, and I've loved your conversations, sort of, in essence, deconstructing his mental problems and the way in which he sort of stepped off the curb. And I can't argue with any of that, except I will say that Donald Trump is just fundamentally unprepared. He never really has information. He's a BS artist, okay? He's a commie. He's always been that way. So when I look, Albert, do you have it? Albert has it. This is, and again, you can look at it through the prism of mental illness. I look at it through the prism of utter incompetence and someone who's utterly ill-prepared for
But it's
any
not,
question.
It's not one or the other. This is the point that I'm making. It's not a binary choice. Is he crap or is he mad? He is both. And the two are not mutually exclusive.
I'm suggesting that his blithering like this, his BSing, his just filling time, he's always been this way. He's a BS. He doesn't know anything of what he's speaking. But your point, I think, is a good one as well. It's just interesting to me that this is a result of you've done so many hours with Bandy Lee, and they've been great. I think it's interesting. You look at him now through the prism, I think, a bit more of his mental illness. And I look at him still through that prism because I've seen him for decades doing this crap, and through the prism of just
But he's
BS.
always been ill. He's always been mentally ill, right? He was born this way, right? It is unfortunate for him. And, nurture with that childhood, I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah.
So after the clip, I'll give you my translation of what I saw, which will probably be slightly different to yours. But bear in mind, he doesn't know what childcare is. You're playing the childcare clip, I presume.
Right.
He doesn't actually know what childcare is. He thinks that it is, I don't know, a nanny or something. I don't know. But what childcare is, what the payments for childcare is, respite for parents so that they can work, for example, he actually doesn't know what that is. So watch the clip with that in mind, and then you'll see why he's blustering, because he doesn't actually know what childcare means.
If you win in November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if so, what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. I was somebody, we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, because look, childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time, coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going on in our country. Because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but those numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be taking in trillions of dollars, and as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kind of numbers we'll be taking in. We're going to make this into an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people, and then we'll worry about the rest of the world. Let's help other people, but we're going to take care of our country first. This is about America first. It's about make America great again. We have to do it because right now we're a failing nation. So
He really just wanted to get to that. The applause line. He had to get to the applause line. Now, go. See, to me, it just strikes me that he is BSing because he doesn't really know what the question was, as you've suggested, I think so correctly. He doesn't know what childcare is. He doesn't know what the question refers to.
Yeah.
So he's going childcare, people affording childcare. What I'm doing is building the economy. Everybody's going to have so much money. You'll be able to pay for other people's childcare type thing. What was your sense of it?
Well, I worked out just then that what he thinks childcare is that children have to be cared for. So he doesn't think of it in specifics. It's not about having somebody come in and be a nanny, for example, for that period. Couple of hours here, 4 hours there, the afternoon when kids come back from school, pick the kids up, get them home, get them fed so that parent can come home from work an hour later. He doesn't know any of that detail because, of course, he wasn't brought up that way. So he thinks, because he says it's not necessary in other countries, that is him being a racist, right? That is him thinking about these shithole countries that he refers to, countries where people have, are born into a nation with brown skin. And he thinks that they're savage and therefore they don't need to care for children. So he's thinking of like children sitting in the street, for example, and just being left while their parents go foraging for trash in a dumpster. That is what he is thinking, because that's how he sees the world, that America is civilized and the rest of the world, especially brown-skinned countries, are uncivilized. So from that clip, that time, because I've viewed it a few hundred times, so it seems, he thinks that other countries don't need to care for children because it's not legal, but here legally you have to care for children. I mean, that is...
when he says especially in this country.
Especially in this country. So that is my analysis of that. But let's just go back to narcissism for a second, because, a lot of people have lived with narcissists, been married to narcissists, have them in their family. I actually have one in my family, which we're having to deal with, and it's not easy. It is a situation where the person is so destructive and their mental illness, whether it be malignant narcissism or covert narcissism, you can learn about this stuff. It's science, right? It's like it's medicine. There's real analysis behind it. And he is a malignant narcissist. So to him, that thing you do when you're young, if you don't want to hear something, you close your eyes, you put your fingers in your ear and you go la 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 la. That is the simplest explanation of what narcissism is, where you believe that if you close your eyes, put your fingers in your ears and la, that the world will just go on pause for a moment. And so that's what he was doing in that section. He is so completely full of himself, and he assumes that everybody who's listening doesn't have an intellect, has never studied, there's no expertise, no one can see through him, no one thinks he's bullshitting, that he can say anything and people will lap it up. And that is the tragedy of the narcissist. And the word of the day is gaslighting. That's what a narcissist does. They gaslight. And what he just did there was he gaslit the entire room. And why they applauded, I have no idea. Because,
that's why, to your point there, I would say that's why he's found his perfect home in the GOP. I mean, they'll continue to applaud him.
It's very, very sad to me that somebody who is so clearly mentally compromised and has no intellect. I mean, the guy, if he was to be tested, I don't know. I mean, I don't know much about the intellectual scale, but I mean, he'd be right down there with the chimps and the knuckle draggers. And yet, because of the TV show The Apprentice, he managed to create an image that people bought into. And so we know the story. I don't need to remind you of the story, but the fact that he's even allowed on the ballot, and the fact that somebody who talks like a imbecile is being applauded and given airtime, it is terrifying. And that is not a partisan statement. It just isn't.
They're clapping because they are rich people and want their tax cuts, says Carol. That is a room of Wall Streeters, he's speaking. But he's not. That's not the G20. That's just a bunch of people who are pretty singular in that regard.
And his people probably led the applause. So, and that, applause is infectious. So, that's something that we need to be deeply concerned about. But I'm telling you, he is not going to win the election. He absolutely isn't. And, but provided everybody goes out and does their civic duty and actually votes and doesn't put it off. And I hope it's not raining that day where you are.
Well, it's interesting that the polling, which I know is I think the polling has to be sort of frozen in time. I mean, how many more people are really there going, I just can't decide? The decision is so starkly different.
Everybody's decided. They're just not saying it out loud. So if you get asked by a pollster, how are you going to be voting, and you're a Republican, and your husband wants you to vote Republican, but you know that you can't vote for Trump, you're not going to tell anybody about it. You're just going to quietly go do it. That's my feeling about it.
There is some truth really to that. And the Bradley effect, it refers back to those who didn't want to say they were voting for the white candidate instead of Tom Bradley in the gubernatorial election in California. So if you take that Bradley effect, so we use that now as a shorthand for don't want to admit I'm voting for, now you fill in the blank. So your narrative is don't want to admit that I'm voting for Kamala Harris. Similarly, it could be, and I think this frankly holds more water because it's sort of you can become a social outcast if you advertise this in the wrong circles. I don't want to admit I'm voting for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if the Bradley effect really suggests that he's a little ahead of where the general polling is. The last thing I'll say, and then I'm going to let you speak. In 2 of the last elections, he was underperforming in polls to just over 3 points and just over 2 points, as you're well aware. And those 3 points and 2 points, that was a significant number of voters, enough to win in 2016, not enough to win, obviously, in 2020.
Well, we have 2 problems here, don't we? One is, who trusts the polls, and are people who are being polled telling the truth? That's one issue. Second issue is we have the Electoral College to worry about, which is a system that can be played. So, of course, if the popular vote was counted, he would lose by a landslide, a country mile. But strategically, there is a way to play the Electoral College system, which they're attempting to do, although I read yesterday that his campaign has effectively dropped 3 swing states because they know they can't win in them. And that maybe will change things. But, last time Donald Trump won anything was 2016. At that point in time, he hadn't committed an insurrection against his own country. He hadn't stolen classified documents and lied about giving them back. He hadn't reversed Roe versus Wade and taken body autonomy away from all the women, 52% of voters in the United States. He hadn't been convicted on 91 charges of fraud and various crimes. He hadn't been convicted of rape with E. Jean Carroll. Or the Stormy Daniels story hadn't really been, in court. All that stuff has happened since 2016 when he last won anything. In 2020, he still lost by a reasonable margin. That is what people seem to forget, that, this is not water under the bridge. These are historic stories. And Americans, as I'm aware of, maybe you can correct me, they don't like criminals. They just don't like criminals. It's not the kind of person you would want to vote for. I'm not saying that MAGA Republicans don't like criminals, because I've seen their flags that they have that say, I'm voting for the felon. And those people you'll never change, but they are not the majority. Trump, as I see it, is a minority candidate who tells you how popular he is when there is no measurement to say that is true. And when it comes to the ballot box, I just don't think people are going to vote for that, which they now know is infected with this, real darkness. Americans don't want that. It's a very positive country.
It's great to hear you say that, and I think there certainly is a strong wave of positivity. I wonder to what extent that will prevail over the forces of darkness. The forces of darkness, I think, are the minority. In fact, if you look at the popular vote, consistently, those forces of positivity, if you want to break it into parties, and please, it overstates it a bit, but we are I'd suggest, a minority-ruled country right now, with the courts essentially taking over the place of legislation being passed in any sort of formal body of a legislature, right? You can't get anything through Congress, and so Supreme Court steps in and gets a lot of stuff done, and you're really living by the courts. And you've seen them really change life in America. It's a means to an end for a lot of GOPers. They focus not so much on the man. I just had a conversation I was mentioning before with a right winger who's a very, charming, lovely, smart person, active in GOP politics for many years. He told me straight up, it's about the Supreme Court for me. He said, I'm not really paying attention to you. You guys can get jacked up on Donald Trump. He's just a means to an end. He didn't say means to an end, but it was clearly that's. So I'm wondering to what extent it's the agenda that extends beyond Donald Trump and independent of Donald Trump into the future for the GOP, and to what extent that will influence the election.
Well, that's just more for the list, isn't it? I mean, the Supreme Court, this far-right Christian nationalist Supreme Court, is another reason not to vote for Donald Trump. And it's so clear. And it's not just the reversal of Roe. I mean, the Chevron deal was also something that, for me, was a line in the sand. Not that I needed convincing. I was just going to say that back in that clip, when he talked about childcare not knowing what it was, he was actually describing a socialist program, right? He was promising socialism. We will look after you. There's going to be so much money in tariffs. We're going to completely look after you. Well, that goes against a lot of conservatives' view of America too, that they don't think that the government should look after you. They think that everyone has to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and just, do it on their own. And so with the problem with Donald Trump's meanderings, or what does he call it? The wave?
The weave. I've just learned about that this week. Yeah,
I think he's talking about his hairstyle. The wave, right? He is now so on the ropes that he's going to start to say things. Oh, he's already doing it. And then that clip was a perfect example. He's going to start to say desperate things like, we will cover all costs for all people. I mean, soon he'll be saying, we're going to give unhoused people homes just because he wants to appeal to anybody in the moment. He's desperate. I mean, are you aware of the phrase, the Dunning-Kruger effect? Because I think that's right. That's a great phrase to describe Donald Trump. It's a cognitive bias where people with limited competence in a particular domain overestimate their abilities.
Well, they think they're the smartest ones in the room.
But he does. And I love that those clips that we've put together on Midas Touch where he says, I know more about wind and energy than anybody else. I know more about the law than anybody else. I know, and it's like, he describes wind turbines as windmills. Well, the people of the Netherlands might have something to say about that. This is the problem with him. He, because of the narcissism, will continue to put his foot in it. And as the stakes get higher, he will say more and more garbage that is going to put people off. And the biggest thing that's happened in the last week, in my opinion, is this analysis of his economic plan. This thing with the tariffs, it doesn't work. The foreign national countries are not paying the tariffs. The U.S. Consumers and wholesalers are paying the tariffs.
Well, and by the way, he's already done it once, and you'd think it was, if not explained to him, it was probably available, that fact. This is a bold fact.
That's right.
As you say, it's not a penalty applied to those who are selling the goods. It's a penalty applied to those buying the goods.
And that's his entire plan for solving all of America's problems, is tariffs on foreign nations. And he can't decide if it's going to be 100% or 200%. Well, there's quite a big difference between those. So he is exposing himself as having no policies. He has no economic or fiscal plan for the country. He's not very good at math. He doesn't know anything about anything, clearly. And that, for people who have money, I'm talking about Wall Street, I'm talking about those billionaire donors, that is going to be a problem for them at some point between now and November. And we only have, what do we have, 6 weeks or something? I mean, it's not far.
I mean, the one thing I would say is that they want their tax cuts, which is pretty significant. Wall Street does.
Yeah.
I think they don't really focus on his economic agenda because they know that it's really just a paper agenda that you can, cut right through. There's no real policy. His outlook is not underpinned by any political philosophy. He's just a guy who can be bought and paid for. He's said it. Give me the money and I will give you the legislation. He said it to oil company executives.
He says it all out loud. But, Wall Street is not the majority of voters. Wall Street is what we know. It's the 1%, right? 1% is not enough to get you over the line. And so I genuinely believe that we have been dealt a confidence trick over the last decade, because it's a decade that we've been listening to his crap. He won once. There is no evidence of him winning anything since. And we know that particular year, 2016, people didn't know about the Russian interference, which has been exposed again in the last week. People didn't know about Cambridge Analytica. They didn't have James Comey making a speech the week before the vote to
that
say
was
that
huge.
Hillary
And also
Clinton was being investigated.
And those who wanted something different, he looked like a change agent. I mean, to me, it was an obvious con and a ridiculous. He was not really a change agent of any kind. But people needed something to shake up the snow globe,
So if you look at the trajectory of his star, it has only risen because he has told us how popular he is. He can't get an audience. The same people go to the rallies. They travel the country to go to the rallies. So, he really is a master showman. But that's where his abilities end. And if you have fallen for it, if you're like, oh, he's very popular, a lot of people like him, that is not a qualitative answer. A lot of people liking him doesn't mean they're going to vote for him. They might like the fact that
but
he's
let me just push back.
showman.
Last thing, I know we're late, Albert, but I just wanted to say this to that. And I love the sunny outlook with which you greet the election in terms of a likely Kamala Harris win. But I will say that people do vote for this je ne sais quoi, this thing. I do like him. I don't know. I know he's flawed, but I like how he's a plain talker. He talks smack. He doesn't take any. He gives it. And there is, in the problem with the American election is, they'll let anybody run, right? You can be a felon, not able to vote in the election, but you're able to run for president. I mean, this is a high school election, but that's the way we run them here. Anthony Davis?
Sadly, I do.
Supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute. 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that?
Yeah.
But we didn't even mention COVID.
Injection inside or almost a cleaning.
I'm getting a COVID treatment right now, please.
Does a tremendous number in the lungs, so it'd be interesting to check that.
Yeah.
Does a tremendous number. But we didn't even mention COVID. 1.2 million people dead. That is also going to affect people's vote. They know that he completely screwed that up. We know that he only got half of the vaccines out.
You say they. I hope enough theys remember that. I mean, the voracious appetite of the news organizations and, the news cycles are just... I think a lot comes down to this quality that was mentioned yesterday by a political consultant we had on, which is sort of that alpha quality. And I think Kamala Harris will have to show a little bit of that alpha quality in the, quote, debate, the TV show that masquerades as a debate on the 10th, next week.
She mustn't do that show. I mean, it's just the worst advice for her to agree to go on a stage with a convicted felon who is a gaslighter and a narcissist. And a showman. She is going into the lion's den. And unfortunately, I'm pleased that it's early and there's still a few weeks to recover, but I don't think that she will poll as well off the back of that. He is going to destroy her because that is what he can do. He can't run a country, but he can go on television and be a bully and a steamroller, especially next to a female, especially next to a female of color, especially next to somebody he doesn't respect.
I've said it repeatedly. I challenge the narrative that I hear over and over again, which is, Kamala Harris is going to wipe the floor with him. No. She's a prosecutor. This isn't a courtroom. There are no rules here. I mean, he will, I believe, do very well in this quote, debate, because it's not a real debate governed by any rules where one has to adhere to any facts.
These things should be organized by Congress, right? So the debate should happen in the halls of Congress. They shouldn't be happening in a Dancing with the Stars style studio with a shiny floor and lights and music and play on music. They should be boring and civic. They should take place in the same room where they have congressional hearings. They should be seated behind desks in a very boring fashion, and then they should allow the TV cameras in. But having the networks run these things and organize them and design them, they are basically just creating Saturday night television.
Well, it used to be run by the League of Women Voters, and they squeezed them out. There was a far more objective approach to it anyway than there is now. As you suggested, now it's animation packages and music sweeps and a big jib camera. It's show business. Go ahead, Kim.
If you think that Trump is mentally struggling, if you think that he can't answer a question without his narcissism playing a role, if you think that I guess the question is, why would Kamala Harris and her team have fought against muted microphones for this debate if they didn't think that all of those things were going to come into play and that basically he would do himself in with his own words?
Well, there is a societal pressure, cultural pressure to take part in debates. And I think that, it'll do more damage if Kamala Harris was like, actually, I don't want to debate. This country would be like, she's weak. She's typical female. All that horrific abuse will come, a lot of it from Donald Trump. So unfortunately, she's already committed to something which she probably knows is not healthy. And, this stuff of her being a prosecutor and that's why she'll be good at it, that has not come from her. That has just come from, opinion pieces, talking heads, and people that don't really know much about this environment. The muted mics thing, it doesn't make any difference. When that light is on or off, he's going to talk anyway, and she's going to hear it. And if she is not experienced enough in that environment, which I don't think she is, she will think that she has to stop talking because he's talking, even though we can't hear him. And that is going to make her look weak as well. So it's going to be a car crash. It's going to be a car crash, whatever happens.
I do think it will be something of a car crash, and a lot of people are going to see it.
Yeah.
Love the 5-minute news. Love what you're doing. Love you. Love your accent. Keep the accent and everything else. Oh, I love it. Yes. How about it for my favorite Britisher and one of our favorite guests, Anthony Davis, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, big flourish, Albert. Thank you. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.